Okay, so let's get started. So hello and welcome to the 5th of the SCAG TDM deep dive trainings. This is going to be on TDM strategies for suburban and rural communities. So again, welcome. Today's speaker is going to be Leslie Scott, and also joined with us on this presentation is also going to be Julia from STEER, as well as myself, TT, and we're going to have a roundtable discussion with Brett from the IE commuter team. So we just want to get to know you better. So if you can please go ahead and please put in your name in the chat, where you're joining us from, that'll be great. What your job title is, and then while you're doing that, I can get Leslie to help us read out some of the charts as we're doing that. So please go ahead, put your name in the chat and where you're joining us from. I don't know, you're muted. I'm not sure if you can.
Oh, yes. I'm so glad to be here today. I've been doing some of the TDM strategy deep dives as well as the introduction, and had also been lucky enough to work on the TDM strategic plan for SCAG. So again, I'm so glad to be talking about the suburban and rural communities today. And as usual, I want to acknowledge and thank the participants. I'm happy to see we've got returning folks. Let's see, a quick glance at my other screen here. My good friend Melissa from City of Irvine, who's been doing her active transportation plan. And we've got Rafi from Cal State San Bernardino, and Fernando from Kittleson, who we've worked on some projects in Orange County together. And let's see, just to name a few more, we've got Jill from LA Metro and John from City Planning, and let's see, Doug from Hermosa Beach. So we've got a really good representation, a little more on the Orange County side right now. Looks like some people are also, though, still typing in. And as I mentioned earlier, we do have San Bernardino, Santa Clarita, Riverside now. So again, we're hoping to have participants from throughout the SCAG TDM region. So with that, I think we can move forward.
Yeah, thank you very much, Leslie. So I think we have a diverse range of people in the room today. Before we go ahead with today's presentation, I'm just going to hand it over to Steve to talk to us more about the SCAG region and what exactly we're doing with TDM in the region.
Thanks, TT. Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Fox, TDM Project Manager for SCAG. And just a little background about SCAG. We're a metropolitan planning organization in Southern California, 6 counties. With the exception of San Diego County, we are the biggest MPO in the United States in terms both of land area and population. And we do a regional transportation plan and sustainable community strategy every 4 years, last one having been 2020, and the next one will be 2024. Next slide. Back in 2019, SCAG developed its first regional TDM strategic plan, and that was incorporated into the 2020 Connect SoCal RTP-SCS document. And STEER and Leslie helped us work on that, as you heard. And it has an array of a lot of resources in it. I'd encourage you to take a look at it. It's on the SCAG webpage under transportation/TDM page. It has an array of recommendations that it made, and SCAG is looking to implement some of those recommendations. The TDM trainings are one of those recommendations, and there were 17 recommendations altogether in several categories, including knowledge sharing, TDM policy, TDM partnerships, TDM programming, and TDM measurement. It also has a very detailed toolbox of TDM strategies, altogether 32, that has a lot of detail about particular specific TDM policies or programs that can be implemented. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Leslie.
Thank you, Steve. Again, I just want to say that we've had a number of TDM sessions, as Steve mentioned, as part of the strategic plan recommendations. And so today we're here for the suburban and rural communities. But before we really do our deep dive, I think either Julia or TT is going to give us a little background information of what we've done so far, and also we'll go through today's agenda. So it looks like the agenda is popped up, and again, we'll start with a recap of TDM, what we've set as the foundation, and then we'll talk about rural and suburban communities in general, and then give some really great examples of what's been the good work that's being done in the region, as well as some innovative things throughout the United States and abroad. And lastly, today we will have a roundtable discussion with Brett from IE Commuter. And that's going to be really the bulk of today's deep dive, is that we want to have a roundtable where we hear from all of you. We're able to exchange ideas and sort of just do a lot of networking and sharing some programming. So the agenda, again, a quick recap, some rural suburban community information, and then our roundtable, and then we'll wrap it up with a survey questionnaire. And so again, with that, let's get a little bit of the background.
Thank you, Leslie. So just before we go into today's session proper, we're just going to give a brief intro into what TDM is. So what are our transportation challenges, and why can't we all drive? Why can't we all drive alone? So one of it is congestion and traffic. We know that with more driving brings more congestion and traffic, which in turn leads to more pollution and air quality problems. And also we know that with more driving, that can also be detrimental to our health and mental well-being, just because of how many man hours we spend in traffic. So that's where TDM comes into play. So basically TDM, or transportation demand management strategy, is the use of strategies to inform and encourage travelers to maximize efficiency of the transportation systems, reduce congestion, as well as lower vehicle emissions. And TDM seeks to do this through the reducing of the need to make trips. So for example, moving to more of a remote work environment, consolidating trips or trip linking. So basically, like for example, running your errands in one go as opposed to breaking them into several different chunks, and also shifting trips to modes that move people more efficiently and sustainably. For example, carpooling or through transit. So TDM has a variety of goals and benefits. So from the environmental perspective, economic and social perspective. So from the economic standpoint, we know that with less cars on the road, that means less maintenance of our freeways, so less money being pumped into maintaining our freeways and our highways. We also know that for employers as well, it reduces the cost for maintaining parking and office spaces. And also, it also helps to improve productivity of employees, because they'll spend less man hours in traffic, and that can lead to employee retention. From the environmental perspective, it gives the opportunity to give back open spaces for green spaces, which can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as reduce local fog. And in terms of the social benefits, we know that TDM promotes greater physical and mental well-being, especially from the active transportation angle. And they can also help promote more livable and social communities, because more people would interact with one another. And so TDM seeks to move people to more sustainable modes through a variety of strategies. And Les is going to be talking more about those throughout the bulk of the presentation. But for example, from the educational and marketing perspective, they can do this through either outreach programs or events. Strategies like incentives and facilitations, which help people make mode shift easier for them by providing maybe like gift cards or any form of incentive, and also facilitation that make it easier to find such modes. Also through infrastructure and system upgrades, for example, widening the pedestrian sidewalks, or through bicycle lanes, and finally through parking strategies, as well as support policies, like maybe incorporating TDM policies into like your master planning. And on that note, I'm going to hand it back to Leslie, who will take us into our presentation proper. Over to you, Leslie.
Thank you, TT. I really appreciate, again, giving us the foundation. Let me figure out here how to share my screen. So give us just 1 second. TT, I thought I was gonna, you were going to relinquish your screen, but just bear with us with the technology. I will pull up my screen now.
Just click through. Or if you want to share, if that's easier, that's fine. But you can let's just share, and just you then have control of it.
Yeah, we'll do that. So I'm going to just scroll again through what we've just gone through, and so here we are. We're back to the TDM in rural and suburban communities. So the question is, why a deep dive for suburban and rural communities? And again, through our strategic plan that we did with SCAG, we were able to do some case studies, and we saw that there is some difference between suburban and rural. So what do we mean by suburban and rural communities? So a lot of it is defined by the census, and it's based on a people per square mile. So our suburban is, let's say, it's got the statistics here are 1,000 to 4,000 people per square mile. But to give you a better sense, what does that mean? Ventura County is a very, very good example in the region of what a suburban community is like, which is, primarily residential. And then we look at rural, and what is, what is it that defines a rural community? And there we're looking at less than 1,000 people per square mile. And it's usually on the fringe or outside of the urban and sometimes suburban areas, although in the region it can be mixed within suburban. So Imperial County seems to be the clearest cut type of example for rural and for a rural community. So what we also found that the American Housing Survey showed that people identified mostly with themselves living in suburban communities in the US and in the rural communities. So I think it was a little bit surprising to see actually how many rural communities we actually have in our region as well. So as you can see, 21% of the people across the US identify with rural and 52 suburban. So that's why we think it's really important for us to cover rural and suburban. So at this point, I'd like to also bring people back to the chat and find out if you identify your work program as urban, suburban, or rural. And I'll be monitoring the chat and pointing out anybody who is saying, let's see, letting us know. And if you can also put the city or the agency that you're identifying, then that would be great. It looks like Rafi from Cal State University of San Bernardino is saying suburban and rural. So yes, the Inland Empire, like that's what I was saying when I was saying that we also have a mix, right, within the region. Some regions, I'll give an example. I was just in Chino the other day, and Chino has some neighborhoods that are very much suburban, and then yet you go a few blocks over and it's quite rural. There's still a lot of open pastures and so forth. So the definitions, again, are from the census, and they try to give us some parameters, but most communities are a mix of things. And Melissa's saying, you know, Irvine is well defined as suburban, and yet we know there are parts of Irvine that have event centers that seem to be a little urban. And let's see, the last example I'm going to give, like I said, I was in Chino, and right next door is Chino Hills. So they are identifying and have suburban and rural. So thank you for sharing with us the mix of communities that we have here today. So the challenges though for rural and suburban communities, like we mentioned, the density is less and there's a lot of automobile dependency. So what does that mean? It means that the distances that people are living and working are much broader, and that our statistics show that they travel 41% longer. And one thing that we have seen during the pandemic as a challenge is that the reliance on the internet has really shown up, and that we see that 97% of the people in urban areas have access to high-speed internet compared to 65% in rural areas. And we have also seen that through TDM, we have been really focused on the automobile and mobility that way, but through the pandemic, we have seen how impactful infrastructure such as the internet plays a part in TDM. And lastly, one of the challenges that I'm sure our friends from Torrance and Santa Clarita and LADOT who are participating today know that there's lower transit ridership and efficient transit services when we're looking at rural and urban communities. I mean, rural and suburban communities. So, oh, excuse me. Let's see. So what is it that we're also focusing on as one of the challenges that we hear often, and that is the funding, the funding opportunities. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, and also in general, again, just access and how TDM access is really important. So what I want to go back to is what TT was talking to earlier, and that is the TDM strategic plan has these categories. And so if you look at the plan, and maybe TT can put the link in the chat, you'll see that the recommendations that we have made were actually done on some of the case studies. We did something which I think is unique to the region, but really helpful, is that we looked at case studies that were trying to identify corridors. So some of the corridors that we looked at for the suburban corridor, for example, is the Office Park commute on the 55 freeway. And then we also looked at rural type of case study, which is SR 118 and agricultural trip reduction. So these are examples of some of the strategies that were recommended. And I'm going to go directly to the strategies, not really read everything in the slide. And so the examples here, although I'm going to stop and see if anybody in the chat has any general questions or thoughts about challenges that we talked about. And then, like I said, we'll go into the examples. So I'll just wait 1 second here. Take a breather as well. Okay, so what I'd like to talk about is one of the first examples here. Oh my goodness, I'm not as proficient. Let's see. So let's see, what we want to talk about is the education and marketing, right? And so one of the examples in the region that is very, very good is the education that we see in Ventura County Transportation Commission, right? And the reason that we're highlighting this is to, again, show that rural and suburban communities have different messaging. So it's really important for them to be able to share their education and marketing. So Ventura County Transportation, as you can see, will do specific tailored ride guides, which is one of the core of their program. And then in rural communities, we've seen that Holtville has done a very comprehensive walk to school day. So those are ways to educate the community on different types of TDM strategies. So next is our incentives and facilitation. And again, I'd like to highlight that we have IE Commuter here. We have Brett, who will be joining us in the roundtable discussion. And they have an incentive program, which we'll talk about. And again, incentives are a great way to get communities involved and to do campaigns with their employers and so forth. And then one of my favorite incentive programs in the region is CalVan's vanpool for rural. And it's basically an agricultural workers vanpooling program. And so as we know, for rural communities, especially agriculture, that they may not have the same workplace every day. And so this is a very, very well-used vanpool program, 40 to 60 vans in Imperial County. So again, two great incentive programs right here in our own backyard. The other category that we're looking at is the, let's see, we've got infrastructure and system upgrades. So for the Suburban example here, we have Microtransit as a system upgrade, and Laguna Beach has launched an on-demand neighborhood sort of what do we call it in the industry? It's a general public dial-a-ride, basically. And so people can use the Microtransit to get around. And I want to also say that our friends from Chino Hills have through Omnitrans have also launched a Microtransit. And there are other communities that are pilot testing Microtransit. So that's a system upgrade to transit to be able to meet the challenge of the ridership. And the reason that it's important is because, as we know, what's different in suburban opposed to urban environments is the suburban environments a little further apart. And so frequency of buses has become an issue. So again, a great innovative solution to deal with transit in suburban areas. And then for the rural areas, Imperial County has done a mobility hub. And so that covers Brawley, El Centro, and Imperial Valley. And mobility hubs are becoming more popular. They're transfer points, but they also have other amenities. Orange OCTA right now is doing a study on a mobility hub. So again, these are different kinds of system upgrades, as well as infrastructure as far as building a mobility hub. And parking, again, parking is a strategy that's in the mix. And so managing parking can be very important. And in the suburban area for Disneyland, the resort area, they're managing parking by bundling it with purchasing of your pass to Disneyland. And what does that mean for TDM? It means that when the parking is bundled, people are going directly to the event center. So you're not having a lot of driving around, you're reducing congestion on the streets. Santa Monica does some parking management as well in the beach cities, which let's see, there are, let's see, parking signs tell you how many parking spaces, and that's another type of parking management. So people, again, are not driving around and you're not getting as much congestion. And we do have a note here for rural communities, not as common to have parking programs, although we have mentioned in many of the other sessions that the parking cash out is a statewide program. And so any agency can implement that and also TMAs often are managing those types of programs for parking cash out. So although we're not showing an example, it does exist. And then I want to talk a little bit about how important policies are when we're looking at how we can affect suburban and rural communities for TDM. And so UC Irvine has a really good example of a housing policy. So the housing policy creates housing near the university and encourages walking and biking. And as you can see, with our statistic here, that 2/3 of the faculty live on campus, walking distance, and that's the policy side. And then Irvine is really good about also matching that with more programming. So the policy establishes the housing, and yet the programming supplements that. So not only the walking and biking, but any of you anteaters out there who have gone to UCI, you know there's a great shuttle program. So that again, just sort of marries and works well with the housing policy. And for rural areas, the opportunity for implementing TDM can often be done through a specific plan. So for Mesquite Lake, what we've seen here is that they do talk about ride sharing and mode shift, and also highlighting transit with the bus route and mass transit along Dogwood. So policies again are really important, and SCAG also has policies going on right now with housing, and there are some cities that are on our call today who are probably dealing with their housing element. And so with housing, what we're seeing is a rise in safe routes to school, because when the housing needs are met, there's also a factor about schools, and a great opportunity for people to, again, implement their safe routes to school plan when you have housing and schools close together, and there is funding for that. So let's see, those are the examples for the chart of the different strategies. What I also want to talk about, as I mentioned, is a little bit about funding. And so these are examples, again, in the region. And so transit is actually been well funded through COVID with the CRISA money, and Mountain Transit is our example of a sort of a suburban, it runs from suburban to somewhat rural area in San Bernardino. It goes down to downtown San Bernardino, as well as Lake Arrowhead, Running Springs, Big Bear, and so forth. And so they have received funding for 5311 funding. So there is funding for transit. And then another funding mechanism, which I really, really think is quite innovative to share, is with Victor Valley. And they have a program called the Trip Mileage Reimbursement, and it's federally funded. It's really, really innovative. Again, it's basically volunteers who get reimbursed for providing what would be like a dial-a-ride for seniors and disabled. So these are just different ways that funds are being used to support TDM measures. And lastly, I would like to broaden our reach here and share some great TDM strategies that have been done throughout the US, and then one abroad. And the state of Vermont has actually a hitchhiking program. And so again, it's part of their sort of ride share and carpooling. And it's let's see, it's similar to what's been done in the Bay Area, where somebody can actually, they're kind of these organic park and rides where people go and they pick up a ride, especially near the Bay Bridge. So again, people trying to create different ways of making their commute easier. And this idea of hitchhiking is kind of fun and a little bit of a throwback. And then as far as we talked a little bit about incentives and how that's really helpful. And Santa Rosa has an actual voucher up to $1,000 for purchasing an electric bike. And I believe the state in June is going to also have an incentive for electric bikes. So keep your eye out for that. I know I am looking at that. And then we have another example in Bavaria of a data-based trip planning and showing, let's see, sort of carpooling and the number of open seats. So let's see, I believe we've got some of that here as well, whereas part of the on-demand shuttle and some vanpool programs are getting apps. And so you can see how many people are on the van and where it's going and things like that. So those are some other examples. What I want to emphasize with all of these different types of TDM strategies is that TDM basically is the programming side, right? So the programs on how we get people out of their cars and into alternative modes of transportation. And I'd like to also summarize that the difference between suburban and rural opposed to urban is that there are different factors, right, that come into play. We mentioned that earlier about the challenges of being even more car dependent, being spread out, as well as the resources. So we're going to sort of talk about that in a, like I said, a roundtable discussion. And our case study is IE Commuter. So what we're going to do is invite Brett to give us a little background. And then before we go into the actual roundtable discussion, after Brett's teased us and got us excited about the roundtable, we will take a break. So rest assured, you'll have a moment. But I'm so excited to have Brett here from IE Commuter. As we know and have said in the earlier part of the presentation, that the Inland Empire has a mix of suburban and rural communities. So we think this is a great example. And I'll stop talking and let Brett tell us about himself as well as IE Commuter.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. Thank you all for joining today. Thank you for having us here. It's always great to be able to help kind of spread the word and let people know what we do at IE Commuter. So really happy to be here. IE Commuter, it's a program that is put on by Riverside County Transportation Commission, Rctc, and Sbcta, which is the San Bernardino County Transportation Authority. So we're kind of a joint program through them. Our main goal is really just to help local employers and employees with customizing rideshare for them. So kind of on the employer end, customizing rideshare programs that can help benefit their business and their employees as well. We're really looking to kind of support employers to make sure that they can hit their South Coast AQMD Rule 2202 goals. It's very important to them. And so we really want to provide them things like any kind of ride matching that we can help support them with. Really the kind of the two aspects of the program are services and incentives. So as you alluded to earlier, we do offer a variety of incentive programs. Our newest one is the $5 a day program. So commuters that either live or work in the Inland Empire are eligible for up to $5 a day in gift card rewards. And that's up to $125 total over a 3-month period. So really kind of providing them a little bit of extra financial incentive for something that, it has a lot of other benefits for them as well as everybody in the community. Other things we do is things like helping with trip planning, providing park and ride information, really just trying to make it as easy for people as we can to make sure that we can find them a solution that works for them. A commute is a big part of people's lives in many cases. So we want to kind of reduce any hurdles that we can to help them with that. Kind of our overall vision is really just improving quality of life for all residents in Riverside County and San Bernardino County, having less traffic, stress-free commutes, and cleaner air. And the great thing with those is the benefits are for everyone, right? So even if you're not actively participating in the program, the more cars we can get off the road, the more kind of single occupancy vehicles we can reduce. That's going to be less pollution for everybody, which is cleaner air for everybody. That's going to be less cars on the road, which is going to help flow of traffic for everybody. So we really, you know, we want people to know that even if it's not something that they directly participate in, they do still get the benefits of it. Kind of the main three things we're looking to do is reduce, again, those single occupancy trips, reduce vehicle miles traveled, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the area. We have a great team of ESRs, our employee service representatives. They do a great job of helping with optimizing outreach to the work sites. I think one of the biggest things in TDM is just recognizing that there are no one-size-fits-all solutions. So we want to make sure that we can kind of customize our services to employers, and where needed to employees as well. We want to make sure that we're working with them, again, to just kind of make these things as easy as possible, offering kind of personalized services where we can. That's kind of it in a nutshell. One of the things I did want to point out is kind of, you know, in the theme of today, talking about rural versus suburban, you know, one of the main areas we deal with is San Bernardino County. And as many people may know, San Bernardino County is the largest county in the nation. It's over 20,000 square miles, which is 4 times the size of like a Los Angeles County. So within that, you know, we have that full array. We have definitely more suburban areas and obviously more rural areas as well. So excited to kind of talk more about that after the break.
Great. Thanks, Brett. That's again, I like how you have emphasized the goals that we talked about in the beginning of the presentation. Let's see, and as well as giving examples of some of the strategies that IE Commuter offers. And like I said, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, the roundtable discussion will focus on this whole subject of deep dive into suburban and rural commutes and what's happening in the region. So let's see, let me hand it back to TT, who is administering this, and have her give us a little bit of a guidance on when we'll come back. So TT?
Yeah. So we're gonna go on a 3 minutes break, and we should be coming back for 10:41. Okay, yeah. So just grab a bottle of water or some tea or something, and be right back.
Thanks, TT.
Okay, so it's 10:41 right now. We can get right back into it. So over to you, Leslie.
Okay, thank you. So Brett and I are back. A quick little stretch there, and we will start our roundtable discussion. Again, for those that stepped away, hustle back, and we'll start talking. And again, it's going to be a really open-ended conversation. What I'm going to do is pretend we're back in person and how we used to maybe sit, you know, in some big chairs and talk back and forth. And then I'll also be looking in the chat. So if somebody has something they'd like to add, I will bring that into the conversation. I'll be sort of facilitating that side of it. So let's see. And I want to, let's see, I'm not as good with these slides, but let's go to the first one. So Brett, I know that you had described a little bit of IE Commuter and the programming and the communities served, but I'd like you to highlight a few things. And one of them is the incentive program as a great example of a TDM strategy that you see that's really effective in the Inland Empire. And in particular, there has been a policy change, I believe, with the program allowing different regions to benefit from it. And I'm emphasizing that because I do think that people on the call should know that when policies are set, those are really important in driving the way a strategy can be implemented. And so let's use this $5 a day as a starting point to talk about a really good program that helps. The reason it helps suburban and rural communities is because, and I'll let you take that away.
Yeah, so $5 a day, a little history on that. It's been in the works for a while. It has kind of replaced and upgraded a previous program, which was $2 a day, which was a great incentive, but obviously more is better when it comes to money. So anything we can kind of do to help boost those incentives is always helpful. And the other thing I alluded to earlier, I think the biggest difference with this program, the biggest upgrade is, again, so the $2 a day was focused on a portion of Riverside and San Bernardino County. With the $5 a day, thanks to our partners, we've been able to expand it. So it covers that entire area. And we're also now able to reach out to those who are, we're looking at people who are maybe LA County or, one of the other surrounding areas that are commuting into Riverside or San Bernardino County. So that's really kind of given us the opportunity to help that program grow. It kicked off, it's been, I would say, about a month now, and the reactions we have been fantastic. I think it ended up with kind of some fortunate timing. I know I'm personally always very hesitant to say the pandemic is over, but it's definitely, you're getting a lot of places that are seeing people returning to on-site work. Not to understate those who also have been on-site the whole time, because that's definitely a demographic that we have out there. So I think between those, it's really helped to get people kind of starting to get back into kind of these commute habits that they may have dropped off previously. It's also been a great time to reintroduce things. I think we all know that there's been a lot of transition in the workforce lately. So we have people with new commute patterns. There's people that maybe for the first time are going a different direction, going further than they used to in the past. So something that we can kind of help promote to them to get them back into the swing of things. Again, I think as far as kind of that suburban versus rural, it's just recognizing what type of employers are out there, and who's in different areas, and how do those, how does that affect the employees. So you have, when you're looking at the more suburban areas, they tend to have more access to things like mass transit. They're going to have more bus lines coming through. They're going to have more access to trains. Probably also, you know, there's certain things you're not going to be looking at. There's not going to be bicycling. There's not going to be walking. Not that there aren't always exceptions. I do know there was a guy I used to work with who would bike 30 miles each way, 2 to 3 times a week. But, you know, we certainly recognize that that's the exception and not the rule. So you want to, again, it's about kind of being flexible and working with people to make sure that they're getting their needs met.
Right. So Brett, you've talked a lot about, or used the word employer a lot. And can you further describe how the program is employer based right now and how that works? We have a lot of agencies who are on the call today, and they are also employers.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about the employer registration aspect.
Sure. So again, we have a team of employer services representatives, or ESRs, that are great about working with employers, making sure that they're getting what they need out of the program. We have a partnership agreement that IE Commuter signs up with these employers. So that really kind of can help us work with them even more. We do have kind of a handful of the smaller incentives that are kind of really open to anybody that's commuting in the area, which is great to have. And those can also kind of serve as a foot in the door, because there are certain occasions where, you know, an employee may be interested in participating in an incentive program, but their employer is not registered yet. So that kind of can help get us a foot in the door. Those employees can often serve as advocates on our behalf to say, hey, this is a great program. It's offered at no cost to the employers, which is always important. We want people to know that, you know, we're there for them. We're there to work with them. And again, it's really when we're looking at employers, it's really needs based on what their needs are. Some of it is just to kind of help grow their programs, making sure they're meeting their goals that they have. But I know a thing you had talked about earlier was parking. There are sometimes employers where parking is a problem. So that's where you look at things like, you know, a vanpool program. You know, how can we help them expand a vanpool program? Obviously, if you have 4 people in a van, that's 1 parking spot, versus if they're coming all together, coming all individually in 4 parking spots. So it's kind of helping to maximize existing resources for them as well.
Right. So Brad, I want to share that when the $2 a day program was in existence, I was an employee transportation coordinator for the LA County Office of Education, which is in Downey. And so we had some employees who lived as far afield as Lake Elsinore. So when I had heard about the program, I made sure that LA County Office of Education was registered. And the reason I bring that up, because we had talked about it earlier, is that a lot of people think, oh, the employer needs to be in the Inland Empire, but that's not the case. You can be an employer that's in a different region, but your employees are coming from the Inland Empire. And that was a great way for us to address the needs of people who were living in further afield locations and in somewhat rural environment. And what I found was that the suburban and rural employee commuters tended to lean towards carpooling and vanpools, which brings me to my next question is, are there strategies that are unique to the suburban and rural areas? And again, we'll talk a little bit more about how it leans towards car travel and actually vehicle travel. But you and I had talked a little bit about also the fact that IE Commuter understands that maybe not everybody is walking or biking, but there's that first mile, last mile. There's a lot of other things that are being done in suburban and rural communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also you bring up a good point with the ETCs, because again, what do we want to do for employers? We recognize that ETCs have, this is kind of for some of the representatives, this can be kind of a large function of their job. Others, this can kind of have really very little to do with their job, and so they don't have a lot of time to spend on it. So we really try to work with them, provide them the tools that are ready to go that they can use to distribute to their workforce. So getting that out there, and that a lot of that to this question is based on what does their workforce look like? Where are they coming from? Where are they located? One of the things I think is very important to recognize with the rural settings is you may have agricultural workers that don't go to the same job site every day. And that, obviously that leads to kind of a very broken commute pattern versus maybe you have somebody that's commuting into an office, same spot 5 days a week. Those ag workers, they may be going to 2 or 3 different locations within the same week. So again, kind of tailoring things, making sure that they have the tools. A lot of that can be things like finding, as you said, when you get out to the rural, this is more people that are driving automobiles. So it can be helping them with finding park and ride lots, helping, again, we have a ride matching program. So helping them find other people in similar areas that do van pooling or carpooling. If you're looking at more of an urban commuter, they often can find those van pools or the carpools without going to a park and ride lot. They have, it's more dense population. They can find people that live close to them. But if you have somebody that's more rural, they go in and they see, oh, I don't have anybody in my area. I'm coming back with 0 results. So one of the things we're working on the back end is how can we improve that? So that way, when people put in their location and they come up with 0 results, we can give them alternatives, things like, hey, we see you didn't get any results, but here's a nearby park and ride lot. And then if they put in that park and ride lot, if they're willing to kind of, again, do that kind of first last mile thing, get to that park and ride lot, then they're going to get more matches because they're kind of pooling together in this one location.
Right, I like that. I really like the fact that IE Commuter is really sort of the, the concierge of your commute, right? And so, like you said, you put in information, you get no results, and then you have this concierge who says, well, let's try something else, and making the offer to in this case, in this example, say, well, if we put in a park and ride, we're going to get more, we're going to get better results. And so I think that's really what I think is unique about IE Commuter. And this goes along with you talk about park and ride lots, and we gave an example about Riverside doing a mobility hub and Orange County doing a mobility hub, and that's sort of the new. It's a expansion of a park and ride lot. It will have a function of being able to park and ride, and it may also have transit connections. It could have some for your 30-mile bike riding friend. It could have some amenities to have a long-term bike parking. So he or she, if he's doing it 2 or 3 days a week, could leave it in a bike locker, or get a tune up there for their bike. And let's see, so mobility hubs, I think, we're going to see that evolve from a park and ride lot into this multimodal hub that Riverside is doing. And like I said, Orange County is looking into it. And so those are both very different. One is more suburban and one is rural, but that strategy can work in both of those environments. So I think it's good to talk a little bit about what things are emerging, right? What are the things that are emerging in the communities? But let's see. Oh, I think let's see. want to make sure I got all my questions. So with this question, we did have a little bit of a briefing before, and Brett and I were talking about, like I'd mentioned, how carpooling and vanpooling seem to be the more popular in both suburban and rural. But we also talked about microtransit, and how I mentioned earlier that Laguna has a great example of microtransit. Omnitrans has done a joint project with Chino and Chino Hills. And so again, the reason that transit works is because instead of having a fixed route bus go in circles with nobody on it, what you're able to do is have an on-demand service. And so can you talk a little bit about transit and how that type of on-demand service really does seem to be, again, evolving as a unique and new strategy to meet the needs of that gap for transit?
Yeah, microtransit, like you said, it's definitely, it's a growing area. It's something that we're looking at how we can incorporate that into the IE commuter program. You know, one of the biggest difference between suburban and rural is really its length, right? You've got suburban people have shorter commutes, rural are looking at longer in general. So we really want to kind of see how that impacts them. I know with vanpool and carpool, one of the concerns is always, you know, what happens if I get stuck, right? What happens if I have to work late and I miss the vanpool? So that's where you come in with your guaranteed ride home program. So it's recognizing again that, you know, if you're in a more of a suburban setting, you're likely looking at lower reimbursements for those guaranteed rides home because it's a shorter distance. The further out you go, it's going to cost more for those reimbursements. So you want to make sure you're kind of set up on the back end to be able to support that, to help kind of minimize those concerns for people. But yeah, with the microtransit, it's like you said, another issue people have with transit is sometimes it can take a long time because they are, you know, they're getting on a bus that may be going a long way that's really out of their way before it kind of finally gets to where they need to go. So things that can kind of cut down that time for them and reduce the impact to their daily life is going to make it more appealing. So I think that's going to be a great new direction that we're going to see coming over the next few years.
Yeah, and then we mentioned in the challenges this idea of remote working and how the internet access is also an issue. And so I do know in the South Bay City's Council of Governments has gotten a grant for increasing broadband at different locations. And again, the mobility hubs have talked about it being a place where there could be little study carrels or, you know, little break rooms where people could use a community-based internet. Is there anything like that IE Commuter has toyed with the idea or sees a future?
No, we're not. IE Commuter is not really particularly involved in that kind of, you know, that end of infrastructure. But certainly, you know, I think along those lines, that's another one of those benefits for the people that are riding the mass transit, right? You're seeing more and more, you're seeing buses that have Wi-Fi now. Of course, if you're going on a train, a lot of trains have Wi-Fi now. So really adding that, it's adding that flexibility for the commuter. So that way, if they, you know, let's say you have a meeting you need to get to, but you want to do some work on the way there. It's something you can't do if you're driving alone in a car. So kind of taking them out and giving them those options. The telework, obviously, that's a huge thing, and it has been huge again, kind of throughout the pandemic. But as you said, that's definitely a differentiation between suburban and rural. You tend to have better access to broadband in a suburban area rather than the further out you get from population centers. So that's also something that we've been working on incentivizing and trying to, we do have a Telework employer assistance program. So, you know, not all employers are familiar with teleworking or have kind of a system in place. So again, that's something that we can help people establish their policies, because for a lot of employers that can be a big thing. It's just we're not really sure how to structure it. So we can help with that. We also now are offering a monthly telework spotlight program, which it's kind of essentially, you know, if you sign up for a commuter, log your telework miles, you get entered into a drawing to win gift cards at the end of the month. So again, really just trying to find those incentives and work with people to make it as easy as possible.
Right. So I would gather to say that the beginning of the question was like, well, we don't do that, but here's all the things we do for telecommute. And that's what I want our participants to understand, is that what IE Commuter does is, again, it's the programming side, it's the promotional side, and the educational. So if we use telecommuting as an example, what you started to say was, well, we can help employers with their policies, which is great. We're spotlighting telecommuting, so that's the educational aspect. And then the incentives for a drawing. Those are all the strategies that we talked about and how it relates to telecommuting. And let's see, what else did I write down here? We've got the policies, the education, the incentive. And so maybe IE Commuter's not doing actual infrastructure, but again, able to help people understand telecommuting a little bit better. And I really like the idea that, again, as a concierge, what you're telling people too is like, and a lot of the commuter bus services, we know that LADOT's commuter lines in this region, they do offer Wi-Fi, and so it's another incentive, another way for people to see a benefit to taking transit. So although my answer, my question and your answers, they all came around to really highlight how all these modes, whether it's telecommuting, vanpool, carpool, or transit, they're service-oriented things that IE Commuter does. So I'm going to move to I think it's our last question here. And we had a TDM workshop earlier on partnerships. And so I wanted us to highlight how this partnership with IE Commuter, Rctc and Sbcta, how it's sort of formed and a little bit of the funding and just, again, illustrate this as a great partnership for transportation demand management.
Yeah, I think kind of going back to the $5 a day program is a great kind of case study of how this partnership works. Again, you know, we have these two great agencies that are very supportive. They were able to go out and advocate on IE Commuter's behalf. They were able to go out and get this increased funding, which we've then been able to implement in expanding and really broadening the reach of this incentive program, which again, you know, we're a little over a month in, and the results have been more than we hoped. So it's been incredibly impressive. And it's, you know, again, it's that not just kind of, it's beyond understanding just how it works for the immediate region. It's really looking at that larger picture and seeing how it all works together. And, you know, kind of like you said, recognizing that there may be employers that are not in Riverside County directly or in San Bernardino County, but have large populations, or, you know, large enough, at least, portions of their workforce that live in those areas that are coming in. So we want to make sure we're helping those people too. So I think with that end, it's just the working together. It's, you know, it's also from a communication standpoint, it's just helpful. They have their own communications outlets beyond what IE Commuter has. So it's a great opportunity to kind of share things, get the messaging out even further than we could on our own. Because as you said, a lot of TDM is just about education. It's about letting people know what's available. you know, are like, so back to kind of the telework thing, $5 a day does not apply to telework, but we have the monthly telework spotlight. So really kind of one of our goals is just to be able to offer something for everyone. So we're, you know, I think much like any kind of customer service oriented thing, you don't ever want to say no, right? You want to be able to say, well, you're not eligible for $5 a day, but we do have this monthly telework spotlight. And that's, you know, again, kind of looking at people starting to come out of pandemic mode. There's a lot of people that are, for the first time, you know, have been offered telework and are going to be offered it going forward, whether that's full-time or kind of a mix, hybrid of virtual and in-person work. We just, again, it's just making sure that you can kind of cover your bases. It's, you know, supporting that broader delivery comes through recognizing that there are a number of different situations out there. So you know, you may have, could be like a local city government that we partner with. So they, you know, they have their people are at desks, they have their own laptops, they have their own desktop computers. It's very easy for them to log, you know, sign in, log their miles. You may have kind of a warehouse situation where people are further out, or again, kind of agricultural workers. They may not have as much access. So, you know, we do, you know, we're trying to move away from paper as much as possible, but we want to make sure that we're able to get those people included in the programs as well. So it is, some of it is still providing, you know, those kind of more manual methods of logging their miles and getting things reported.
Great, great. And so just to clarify for some of our, again, some of our people who are on the call, we have, you know, a wide representation from, like I said, we've got Orange County, LA County, Ventura County, San Bernardino, and Riverside. So we've got just about everybody in the SCAG region here. So can you, for those that don't know about Rctc and Sbcta, what those agencies, well, what the acronyms are and sort of what they do, and why they chose to create IE Commuter?
Yeah, so again, Rctc is Riverside County Transportation Commission. Yes. Sbcta is San Bernardino County Transportation Authority. So really kind of those governing bodies of transit within those regions. So they, you know, they've been able, again, to kind of through different, you know, work with regional legislation, things like getting funding for our programs. It's just, again, been a I think it's definitely one of those cases where the two create a whole that is much more than they could have done individually. So pooling resources, and again, you know, from just recognizing commute patterns, recognizing that there's a lot of crossover between these areas. There's people that go back and forth between Riverside and San Bernardino daily for their, as part of their commute. So you know, recognizing that opportunity and then combining those resources into the IE commuter program has just been a huge benefit.
Right, and the reason that we highlighted Rctc and Sbcta today is because we're talking about the deep dive with rural and suburban communities. But rest assured, all of the other regions also are doing TDM, OCTA, and Ventura County Transit, and LA Metro. So each of the regions does have an agency that is also supporting TDM delivery programs. But today we're talking about rural and suburban, so we thought IE Commuter would be the perfect group. So Brett, I think that concludes our little chit chat, but I would like to stop sharing my screen and open it up in the next 10 to 15 minutes to see if anyone would like to share live, meaning unmute your mic, to talk about their unique suburban or rural programming. And Jill has, from LA County, has shared with us in the chat that there is free broadband for the LA County residents. And LA County, as much as it seems congested to many people who are outside the county, does have some actual suburban and rural areas. So it's not limited to just urban, LA being urban. We do have suburban and rural areas. So thank you, Jill, for putting that in the chat. Jill, would you like to unmute your mic and say anything more about that type of TDM strategy?
That's just well, I guess I need to clarify. So it's a plan. It's a motion to develop this plan and look for, federal or state funding to support, especially for the equity focused communities.
Great. That's why I asked you to open your mic, because I wasn't sure exactly what it is. But like I said earlier, when policy is set, that really allows for implementation and facilitation of the programming, right? So it's a key part of it is to make sure that your policies are moving in the direction to meet the goals of the TDM. So thank you, Jill, for sharing that. Does anybody else like to either share with us a program or comment on any of the examples that we gave, or asked for clarification on any of the examples? Just open your mic and I will call on you. I don't see anybody right now. I am going to actually call on my friend Melissa to share with us a little bit of the great stuff that's being done in Irvine. And in fact, Melissa and I were in an interview, or our colleagues were in an interview about the mobility hub. So any aspect of being a very suburban community and what Irvine has been doing?
That's why we're here. We have a lot of challenges, right? We've tried a lot of things. Some of them have worked, some of them haven't worked. And I'll be honest, one of the challenges we face is waxing and waning support, if that makes sense. So kind of the push to do something and then it kind of falls out of favor. So that's definitely something. And we haven't yet been able to capture something strong enough to have a need. We do have kind of some of our iShuttle programs, but again, with COVID, it's wiped it out. And I'll tell you, we're in the middle of a transit vision plan where we're looking at what we may want, which would include some microtransit options, some new transit routes, but those are really the transit focused side. And I'll also say our TDM, we have private partners that are funded privately. We have one specifically to the Great Park. We have one specifically for kind of our Spectrum area. We had one for our IBC area. Those are kind of our more dense urban areas, but it hasn't, again, been as successful as the other ones. And really, the reason the Spectrum one is so successful is because it is funded and it has full-time staff that actually go out and market and advertise and work with people and almost personally walk them through what their options are. And I think that's made a big difference, but finding the resources to do that on a larger scale is really difficult.
Right. So Melissa, we've been in the industry for a long time, and Spectrum Ocean the Spectrum TMA has been operating based again on I believe a developer agreement or developer partnership where the tenants are paying into the TMA, and that's one that's one scheme that is often used to fund TMAs. But to your point, the TMA works a lot like IE Commuter, and I really like the word that I've been using, which is concierge service. That's what it does, right? It's helping people see what these options are. And Brett gave a good example when I asked the telecommute question. It's like, oh yeah, it's actually on some of these commuter buses and some local transit. So, you know, people don't always think that they have Wi-Fi access in different places. And so, although it's not a financial incentive, it is definitely a benefit that comes from it. And only through a TMA or a concierge service, you know, do most average people find that. So Melissa, thank you for giving us some insight on the challenges that are happening with Irvine, especially with the transit. as well as recognizing the Spectrum TMA, which usually we have had them highlighted in a lot of our presentations. So usually we have them. In fact, I asked our team, can we replace it with Ventura so that we can see some other people? But also the fact that that TDM interest is waxing and waning is good to get an idea of where things are now. So Melissa, you opened your mic again. Did you want to say something else?
No, I was just going to say thank you very much for putting this on and yeah, providing those other examples because they are really helpful.
Right. The reason that I also put specific examples in the region, having worked with different agencies, I found that planning commissioners and councils, although they like the innovation that we share from nationwide and from abroad, they want to know, okay, if we're going to do microtransit, who's doing it in the region and how successful is it? So that's why I wanted to give resources to this group that pinpoint and say, hey, you can, after this call, you can call Laguna, you can call Omnitrans, you can call Sunline Transit, you can ask about CalVans. Like, these are all buzzwords, and that's going to help you when you need to make a case about a TDM program. That's the reasoning behind these very specific examples. So I also am looking around to see if anybody else would like to open their mic. Brett's going to chime in.
I was going to say, it's kind of reminding me, one of the things we've started doing with IE Commuter, I want to say it was maybe last October or so, we started doing a monthly office hours session, which has continued to grow every month. And one of the things, you know, we started out with our presentation. We pick a topic every month. When we're fortunate enough, we have a guest speaker. But then a really, I think what people have found a helpful component of it is just it's an opportunity to get these employers together and you know, facilitate some conversation between them so they can talk about their programs, and really gives an opportunity to give those examples of, you know, this is what's really worked well at our work site. Because I think it's really just making those connections. And we also, you know, we'll get some people in there from some of the local transportation agencies, and it gives them an opportunity to connect with the employers and let them know what they have going on and how, you know, what's maybe new coming up for them that can help the employers expand their programs.
Right. So if some of you still get the let's see, SCAG used to put out a newsletter that actually facilitated that. So they had TMAs within different regions. And so it was an opportunity for, again, this idea of partnerships and collaborating. And you're right, information sharing is really key. So IE Commuter is a good spot. I think we're developing also some things in Los Angeles with Warner Center. So there are different, Pasadena still has a network that they get together. So again, look out for your friends because they will help you. Chat and Santa Clarita. I was just gonna call on Alex. Alex, are you still there? Can you open your mic? Yes, Alex is still there.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, so I wasn't sure where you were on your microtransit, so I was highlighting Omnitrans only because I actually tried it in Chino the other day. But Alex, again, is part of a network that I'm on. It's a marketing network for transit, and so, like I said, rely on your friends, and Alex is one of them. And can you, again, tell us a little bit about the microtransit and, again, Santa Clarita's challenges that they face in general as a suburban, slightly rural community?
Yeah, I mean, we introduced it as a way to fill in specific areas in the community that weren't currently served by traditional fixed route. And it kind of had its ebb and flows with COVID, but we recently opened it up citywide just for basically on-demand general public service. And it seems to be taking off. I mean, we're averaging 60 plus rides a day with usually 2 vehicles on the roads. We have up to 4 that we deploy depending on demand, but yeah, it seems to be going well now.
That's great. Any other challenges that you anticipate in just reaching the needs of the community for first mile, last mile?
Well, I've since moved out of transit. I'm in traffic now, but from what I'm currently seeing, I still monitor it every day. We're getting a lot of cross-town trips that really should be pushed to fixed route. So I think education and maybe a better partnership between our fixed route service and on demand to, get those longer city hauls on fixed route where it's a little bit more feasible. And that opens up on demand for shorter first mile, last mile trips.
Great. Thank you, Alex. And congratulations to moving over to a different division. And I'm going to just call on one more person and then we will conclude our roundtable. Joanne, do I have it right? Joanne from Chino Hills? Is that right? Let me look around. Like I said, well, we're seeing if Joanne is able to share with us. Like I said, I keep talking about Chino Hills because I tried that and I thought maybe if she was able to share, that would be great. We also do just one more person here. Anybody want to open their mic and let us know what they're doing in the agency that they're working at that's TDM related? My eyes are dotting around for an open mic. Okay, well, we had Rafi who was on the call and I believe no longer on the call from San Bernardino. Usually we get some input from him, but since we don't, does anybody have any general questions about TDM or how to get in touch with Brett for more information? Any general questions? Okay, last call, as they say. Brett has his information in the chat, and I encourage anybody who is just in general putting together a program or an educational strategy or an incentive, use Brett and myself as a resource. We're happy to help. And with that, I also will turn it back to my team. I think TT has put a survey in the chat, but let's have TT wrap this up.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Leslie. Yes, just a few housekeeping things before we go. I have put in the chat our SurveyMonkey survey. Please fill that out. We'd like to get your feedback on how this presentation went. And just we're also going to have one more last training coming up on the 26th of May. It's going to be on TDM metrics, so please register for that if you haven't. And also, if you want to get the slides or like the previous presentations, they're all going to be up on the SCAG's website. We do have the previous video presentations on SCAG's website. So that's it for now. And thank you all for joining us today. And we hope you found this presentation informative. And we look forward to seeing you in our next presentation, in our next training. So, but please fill out our feedback survey. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, and we do have a minute or two, so I'd like to give Steve the opportunity to acknowledge and say anything else to close out our workshop today.
Just to say thank you, everybody, for attending, and hope to see you at our 6th session a couple of weeks from today, if you're interested in that particular subject matter.
All right, so thank you very much, and this concludes the Suburban and Rural Deep Dive for SCAG's Transportation Demand Management. And again, most of all, thank you, Brett, for a really fun conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.